Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners, and welcome back to Nighttime. Tonight, we're going to turn our gaze up to the skies and to a fascinating new development that's playing out here in Canada. For decades, reports of strange lights and unexplained phenomena have captivated Canadians. And while the questions surrounding those sightings remain as compelling as ever, how we approach them is beginning to change. The federal government's Sky Canada project is leading the way, taking the first serious step to study how unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs or UFOs, are reported, analyzed, and understood in this country. And here's the exciting part. The team behind the Sky Canada project has just released a preview of their findings. This early look reveals key insight into Canada's fragmented reporting landscape, it highlights some surprising gaps, and lays out recommendations that could completely transform how UFOs or UAPs are investigated, both by scientists as well as the public. To help us unpack the preview of this report, I'm joined by someone uniquely positioned to do so. Chris Rutkowski is a renowned UFO researcher, science writer, author, and, consultant for the Sky Canada project. So let's get into it. Tonight, in this episode of the Nighttime Podcast, Chris Rutkowski and I will be discussing the preview of the upcoming Sky Canada project report. Let's get into it.
Well, Canada has launched the Sky Canada project, a study planned to collect information to document rare natural phenomena. It's the first known official Canadian UFO research effort in nearly 30 years.
The first official study into sort of potential UFOs or whatever they're calling them now.
Aerial phenomena.
What does that mean? Right? Yeah, let's call them UFOs. I like that better. Everyone knows what we're talking about at that point. Mm-hmm. How significant is it that the government is really addressing this so publicly and really actually looking at it?
Now, it is significant that we're looking into it now. It is a serious national security issue, but it's not quite as new as it might seem.
Mr. Chris Rutkowski, it's been too long. I don't think we haven't been on here chatting UFOs and related subjects, and it's been months. What have you been up to? What's going on over there?
Indeed, Mr. Bonaparte, we have really been a little slacky here. Well, you know, there's a lot of interesting UFO news. I mean, people are really excited about whistleblowers and eggs and all that sort of stuff. But in Canada, we had a pretty big story last week that deserved to get a little more attention than it did.
Well, maybe I missed it. What happened last week in the world of UFOs?
Well, the Office of the Chief Science Advisor for Canada, who reports directly to the Prime Minister of Canada, whoever that might be soon, issued a report on the Sky Canada project, which has been billboarded by a lot of so-called UFO experts and UFO fans as Canada's big UFO project, part of disclosure and all that sort of stuff. But that's not what it was designed to do at all. And it was a project that began 2022-ish is when they're saying that they really started in earnest working on it. Not because there were requests from politicians or anybody like that, but because they're being responsive to what the public is curious about. And at that time, the American congressional nonsense was really gearing up, and people were talking about Navy plane videos. And because Canada is partnered with NORAD, and in 2023, of course, Canada and the United States were chasing UAPs and balloons all over the north.
Yeah,
together. Canada wanted to be in a position to participate in a more active and serious way in trying to understand what's going on with UAP, so it has something to talk with the Americans about. So the Sky Canada project was designed to try and figure out what it is that Canada is currently doing at a governmental and military level about UFOs or UAP, and then come up with a plan, an actual, let's figure out the best way to approach this and identify what is being done, what should be done, and suggest some recommendations. So that was the goal of the Sky Canada project. But a lot of people said, "Oh no, this is the big UFO report. Canada's going to, finally say exactly what's going on and what the UFO reports are, which are the best reports, and where the hot spots are.
They're going to reveal the aliens, is what people are thinking.
and so according to certain experts, there's a couple of crashes and hidden, giant mile-wide alien ships somewhere in Canada. So maybe that's what's going to be in this report, but that's never what this report was about. It was really about laying the foundation by a group of scientists. Now we have to say that the Office of the Chief Science Advisor of Canada has a team. Almost all are scientists in their own right in a number of fields. In fact, the person who is the Chief Science Advisor, Dr. Mona Nemmer, is an expert in cardiology and heart research. On the team are people who are experts in geology. There are experts in genetics. There are experts in a whole bunch of different fields, none of whom have any experience with regard to UFOs. Although there was one astrophysicist who was on the team.
Okay. But still, as you said there, these people involved in the Sky Canada project, it's not like they're applying their backgrounds to figure out what these UFOs are and if it's aliens and all this stuff. It's more how the reports are received, how the data is collected and used so that it can be used for scientific ends.
Right.
And also, like, a big part of their work seems to be also to combat the misinformation that is broadcast far and wide, much louder than any kind of scientific work on this topic.
Yes, as a matter of fact, they said a lot in their report, specifically about misinformation, bad information, lack of transparency. So on the one hand, you have all these scientists who don't know much about UFOs, and they said, okay, what are we doing about UFOs? So they didn't have a lot of understanding of what had been done. So they reached out to a bunch of experts for contributions and suggestions. I was one of them. I
saw your name in this, and oddly enough, it's like we don't have the full report yet. What we have is the preview of the report and I think the report is like at least a couple months away. But one of the things they listed is the different groups and subject matter experts that are contributing. And I saw right there, Chris Rutkowski.
Yeah, I was really honored. They invited me to a big meeting, and we talked about stuff. I told them, what I'd been doing. I discussed the history of ufology and UFO research in Canada and some of the major players and things that we've known about for a while. It's true. This is not even the report, what we just got last week, but it was called the preview.
The 3-page version, well, more like probably like 10-page version of probably like a 100-page report.
Well, yeah, and one of the reasons they did that, of course, was that they were delayed. I mean, they've been working on this for years, and they're supposed to have this out in late summer, early fall of 2024. They got delayed, been working on all sorts of things. They told me they were doing all things like dotting I's and crossing T's and making sure the right words are right and all this sort of stuff. And it got so late, they said, well, we're going to split it into two. We're going to send out, in fact, late December, they were telling me they're going to have it out by the end of the year. But they thought, okay, we're going to put out a 2-parter, like you say, and it's a message from the director, like you say, the executive summary, a list of contributors, and then a discussion about a survey that they conducted of Canadians to find out what Canadians thought about UAP in general. And then the second part, which I suppose, going to list exactly what people contributed and what they heard from people like myself, supposed to be March-ish. Although, given that they've been delayed a little while already, I wouldn't hold your breath for that.
Yeah, the survey that they did was fascinating. We'll get into some of that, but it's basically they sent a company to ask Canadians a bunch of questions about UFOs. Where they read about this stuff? Do they believe the government should take it seriously? Do they think it's aliens? Have you seen one? And, to hear, I don't know, Chris Rutkowski is doing this kind of survey is one thing, but when it's like the federal government doing this data collection, it's interesting. They're certainly taking UFOs seriously, or UAP as they call them almost exclusively in the preview we see so far. I guess we're going to have to adopt that because that's like it or not, people are calling them UAP now.
Yeah, I suppose grudgingly.
Yeah, but it's one thing that's clear is the Canadian government is going to be taking reports of UFOs seriously and for a variety of reasons as they outline in the report. And another thing that is clear is they intend to be transparent about what they're doing, what information they receive. Like if all goes according to plan as we see it described in this preview, the future of UFO sightings and research in Canada is going to be a whole different thing. Now, I want to start by, and I hate reading long documents, but I want to start by reading the Canada's Chief Science Advisor, Mona Niemers. Did I get the pronunciation right? Yeah, I want to start by reading Mona Niemers' introduction because I think it just gives such a great explanation of what's being done and why it's important. It's a bit long, so bear with me. So here's what she writes at the beginning of the Sky Canada project's preview. Weather satellites, drones, planes, or atmospheric events, no one would deny that there's more and more activity in the skies above us. Our ability to understand what we observe depends on a multitude of factors such as time of day, cloud coverage, distance, and color contrast. Rarely does anyone mistake a flock of geese flying in V formation for a fighter squadron flying at high altitudes. But sometimes what's being observed in the sky is not immediately clear, and a person may wonder if what they're seeing is a natural phenomenon, a new type of aircraft, or something else altogether. The world of aviation continues to grow and diversify, serving businesses, national defense, tourism, and recreational needs. More than 100,000 commercial flights take place every day around the world. Engineers seek to improve the shape of the aircraft and find lighter and stronger materials to take them faster and more efficiently. To save energy and reduce the environmental impact of air travel, there are even plans to use airships and balloons of various types for passenger transportation and cargo. Meanwhile, drone technology is becoming increasingly affordable and ever more impressive, allowing virtually anyone to pilot devices as small as a bird or as large as a vehicle. Can we identify these devices at night as well as during the day? Can we accurately assess their distance and speed based solely on their navigational lights? A light moving slowly across the night sky could be a drone 100 meters above the ground or a satellite at an altitude of 600 kilometers reflecting the sun. To the naked eye, a train of Starlink communication satellites appear as faint points of light moving in a straight line in complete silence. If the observer fails to recognize the signs of that new technology, will there be someone nearby to offer the correct information? Or will the observer rely on social media to share what was seen and find some explanations? Social media and the internet have it all, from the good and the very good to the bad and the very ugly. Which Canadian websites can people visit to report sightings of unidentified aerial phenomenon? Which, of course, they use the acronym UAPs. To which official organization can they send photos, videos, or detailed descriptions for help in understanding what they cannot explain on their own? It was with these questions in mind that we launched the Sky Canada project. Our goal is to find the current resources and processes in place for handling and following up on UAP reports, to compare them with the best practices in other countries, and to make recommendations for potential improvements. Accordingly, this report focuses on the services available to the Canadian public for reporting UAPs, and not at the UAPs themselves. Understanding this distinction is critical to reading this report. The Sky Canada project is not about investigating what UAPs are, it's about science informing and serving everyone. The preparation of this report has garnered more public anticipation than any project in the history of this office. Numerous individuals and organizations have stepped forward to offer their assistance, and we're grateful for their interest. On behalf of the Sky Canada project team, I'd like to thank the many contributors who agreed to answer our questions in support of our work. Federal public servants, journalists, Canadian and foreign academics, subject matter experts, and members of the public. Our study would not have been completed without your input. So I think that explanation, and that comes from the Chief Science Advisor for Canada, that explanation or that introduction, it hits on a lot of the topics that we've been discussing. This idea, you see the Starlink and you don't know what that is, so you hop on Facebook, and next thing you know, 50 people in your small town are talking about the alien invasion. Then one of your photos makes it to a UFO group like UFOs Above Canada or the many others, and someone's like, yeah, that's Starlink.
Yeah.
I think it seems like the Canadian government sees that as a potential problem, getting in the way of people understanding what's happening in the sky. And that's one of the things that one of the reasons they're taking this on.
Right. Two things to pull out of that. There's so much we could cover there. One is the Canadian government as a whole isn't recommending this. This one department and the head of the department making a recommendation to the prime minister. And the recommendations we hope will be adopted. I mean, they made a lot of recommendations, and we can get into them later. But I mean, nothing's happening yet. And who knows, with a change of prime minister, possibly change of government, this could die on the drawing board or something like that. But we're hoping, matter of fact, one of the survey questions that we can talk about later asked Canadians, do you think that the government should spend money on this, allocate funding to study UAP? And more people thought that the government should than not. And should there be a government office to, handle this? And, most Canadians thought so. So, if the demand is there and the public would like to see this, we're hoping that this will move forward and this office will, continue to get some funding. The other thing is, and you caught that, UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, and we're setting ourselves apart from the United States because in the United States, it's unidentified anomalous phenomena.
Okay. I didn't notice that as I read it, but now that you say it, do you think there's any reason for that?
Well, the anomalous part really came a little bit later, after they'd been studying this for a while. I don't think anybody really talked about underwater objects, which is one of the reasons why the United States went to anomalous. And the other one was space objects. That was the other reason why they had to include the anomalous as part of the acronym. And Canada doesn't really have any satellites that are looking for other things in space or detecting other things. And I mean, astronomers are seeing things all the time. But in terms of spaceborne objects and space things out there, like the United States is checking with its Space Force, we just don't have that. So, it's a little scaling down, but I mean, we can even still call them UFOs. I don't know.
Yeah, I just like that, but I get the taboo associated with it. And when you're putting it forward as like a government initiative to obtain scientific data on this stuff, just using the acronym UFO in there is just going to turn some people's
Absolutely,
head.
Yeah.
UAP, it's almost like the term. It's almost like the whole subject needs a fresh start and a facelift, and I think that's what UAP has given it. But let's get into some of the report. There's quite a few parts of the report that, as I read through it here, I thought I got to get Chris Rutkowski's take on this. And the reason I'm so interested in talking to you about this is, for one, you're one of the contributors and the kind of the subject matter experts that were involved in this. But really, it seems to me like the people behind this report. I've just been saying government, but I know it's not, Justin Trudeau and his friends doing this, but the people behind this report, it seems like they're really taking the work that you've been doing freelance volunteer work for the last, whatever it is, 20 or 30 years with your Canadian UFO survey, and they're just doing a much more official version of that. Like, is that how it feels to you? Like, wow, like, you're looking to do what I've been up to.
As a matter of fact, they listed a bunch of questions that they were going to be asking, how many UFOs are seen in Canada, where do you report them, all this sort of stuff. And, they could really just take the Canadian UFO survey and apply all those answers. In fact, I pointed that out to them.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing, though, is they are really trying to go about this in a very strict, rigorous scientific methodology.
Which is important. I think if you're going to get into this topic, if you can keep it strict and on the line, it avoids so much kind of chaos that's going to pull you away from the goal of understanding what's happening in the skies.
Right. As a matter of fact, it's probably a good analogy. They're going to do the Condon report, the Colorado study from the United States, a scientific study of UFOs, but they're going to do it right because they want to make sure that mechanisms are in place for people to report UFOs. This is part of the recommendations. They want to make sure that when a UAP is reported, somebody investigates. It's possible to follow it up. It's possible to convey the information to the public who wants to know, what has been seen last Tuesday or something like that. They want to make sure that there's research that's going to be done. They want to make sure that the media are informed, that it's going to be all transparent, and there's offices where people are going to be looking at this in all seriousness. They want to have all of that in place before we actually go forward and try, saying send us your UFO reports. And it's sort of the right way around. And people, one of the criticisms of the AARO in the United States, the All-Domain Anomaly Research Office, is that they produce this report showing in general how many reports in total they got, and the average of all the sizes, the average of all the heights, and all this sort of stuff. But people have asked them, well, what's your methodology? How where are you getting these reports from? Who's studying them? All that sort of stuff. They haven't produced any of the intricate details on how the research is going. In Canada, the Sky Canada project is laying that all out first. They want to say, okay, we need people here. They're actually inviting the Canadian Space Agency to be involved, for example. They want to make sure that universities and colleges and planetariums and museums and wherever are going to be on board with the Canadian government when the project gets going to assist them. They actually said maybe public libraries can have public events to talk about UAP. They want citizen science. They want, a lot of buy-in from all the various government departments, which are sort of doing it willy-nilly. I mean, Transport Canada's collecting UFO or UAP reports from pilots. National Defense is doing so. RCMP are probably doing a little bit more, and a few other agencies. So they want to make sure it's all coordinated and that they're all doing it the same way. Transport Canada is not collecting the same data as National Defense. And, you want to be able to get all this together. So the idea is that, they wanted to find out what's being done. So they asked a lot of departments and a lot of people, and we're going to find out what they found out when the second half is done. But their recommendations are very broad. Let's do this right. And from a scientific point of view, in fact, defense was hardly even alluded to in this, whereas the United States, the AARO talks about defense. In fact, all of its cases are military. So, and in Canada, that's not going to be the case. It's going to be more, community and public oriented.
Interesting. One of the beginning paragraphs in the preview that was released discusses like the current inconsistencies with reporting and the fragmented nature of UFO reports in Canada, or UAP reports in Canada. Just as you mentioned there's so many different groups, be it official government spots or the RCMP or the odd civilian groups or even, Facebook groups and stuff. The issue with getting everyone on the same page to get those reports the same way and put them in the same place. You've kind of been the guy in Canada who's been sort of the middleman between all of these groups, collecting everything and compiling it in one spot. Do you think the Canadian government, if this all goes according to plan, do you think they're even going to be capable of doing this? It seems like a big job that will require someone with passion and kind of people skills to navigate all this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would sympathize greatly with whoever eventually gets this job in the office, because they're going to be inundated. As a matter of fact, one of the other comments that Mona Nemmer, talked about was that they were really inundated with with responses from the public and from other departments, and they said that they'd never received such a response. I think it was in the CTV interview where they never received any kind of response about this with any of their projects. And you have to understand, the Chief Science Advisor's office is involved with a lot of other scientific research. They're involved in things like microplastics in the oceans, how to solve that problem, climate change. They're involved in COVID. They're involved in new up and coming diseases. And Arctic drilling and all that sort of stuff. They're involved in all these types of scientific discussions, but the UAP issue has been the one that they've received the most response and the greatest response from. So, and it's going to be quite a challenge.
Yeah. Well, one of the challenges they're facing, and they outlined this in the preview, is deciding who would lead the work. Because it's not like this group is coming out and saying, like, we want to be in charge of it, we're going to manage everything. They're, just as you described earlier, they're more interested in coming up with the framework for how reports will be received and compiled and shared. But they're also making it pretty clear, like there needs to be a lead, someone who's going to take the ball and run with it. We're just putting the foundation together, and this is going to be for someone else to do. Do you have any idea or your best guess on who is going to be tasked with managing UFO reports in Canada? Like it seems like Transport Canada would be an appropriate spot, but I don't know. Do you have any idea on this?
Well, if you're watching this, Mona Number, my number is 204-89. No, wait a minute. You have my email.
If it's a government mandated thing and the government's requiring this data or getting this data or asking for it, I'm assuming they would do it in a different way than Chris Rutkowski and friends would approach, said group.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there would have to, the office that would be created, I don't know where. Dr. Nemmer says maybe through the Canadian Space Agency, and they would announce, send all your UFO reports here. Whether the public would say, sure, or say, no, I'm going to send it over here instead, I don't know. There would have to be a lot of trust right now. For a lot of reasons, there are people who aren't trustworthy of the government. We don't believe that they're actually going to be listening to us anymore and all that sort of stuff. They would have to be buy-in. They have to be reassuring Canadians that this is going to be a serious scientific study and not a whitewash, as some people are going to say. I mean, people point to the Condon report. People are already reporting to the AARO as useless. NASA in the United States has been, criticized heavily for, their approach to UAP. And, to be quite honest, I mean, the Canadian Space Agency has never really taken any interest in UAP or UFOs at all. As a matter of fact, when you file an access information request to the Canadian Space Agency about UAP, you get a few pages of documents from people who have submitted things to UAP requesting information about the Canadian Space Agency and UAP. So it'll be very curious to see how that evolves.
Just with it, when you talk about the topic of trust and looking at Mona Niemer's introductory letter that I had read earlier, misinformation creates a lot of problems in this. And one of the things that they discussed and you discussed yourself tonight is this idea of maybe helping the public improve their science literacy and remove a bit of the stigma or the taboo around this by having discussions at libraries. Like, do you think that there would be a way to get the public on the same page about, trust this group, give them your data, answer their questions? Do you see that ever being okay? Because I just look at the pandemic and COVID and vaccines and all this stuff and the way that came down. I can only imagine what the UFO people are going to be saying when it's time to pass the files over to the government.
Sure. And, having, talked about scientific literacy or, among the general population, well, you have to remember, this is also the government department that was involved in COVID research. And so they would certainly have issues about literacy of Canadians in terms of, understanding science. And there would be a problem with misidentifications, and not necessarily hoaxing and all that sort of stuff, but people see things and they think that it's an illuminated jet contrail is something falling from space and that type of thing.
Or like we've talked a lot about every time Starlink launches new satellites, we get UFO reports of somebody seeing a group of spaceships that are flying over Pictou County, Nova Scotia. Like we get that sort of thing is very, very common. I do wonder what harm that causes, though, because it seems like in the Sky Canada project, they are trying to combat people seeing something that's explainable, like Starlink, and hopping on Facebook and writing, God knows what about what they saw. I don't see what harm that does, but maybe you can explain.
Well,
because I find I will say I find it amusing.
Well, there's no question it's amusing. It's a little sad too that some people will see Starlink and say that they felt chosen by the Space Brothers to see such a an extraordinary
They always knew they
event
were
and all this sort
different,
of.
and now it's
Yeah, that's right. And these are people who also make decisions in their everyday lives about care of their families, about voting for certain political organizations, about what they should do in their lives. It's there. I mean, years ago there were a lot of people who really came down on astrologers because they're people were using astrology to guide their everyday lives. You don't hear about that as much. There's still horoscopes in every newspaper. And why do people read them? For entertainment, but there are people who read them because they think they're really, really accurate. So in the same way, people are, living their lives, thinking that the world is a little more different than it really is. And living their daily lives in ways that could affect other people. You can go to the extreme, where I'm giving a presentation in another week about abductions, for example. The old UFO abductions we haven't heard of for some time, but back a number of years ago, I helped facilitate an abductee support group. And some of the people who had come to the support group were, either abductees or contactees, depending on how you define that. And some of them had attempted suicide because the Space Brothers were monitoring their every move and were telling them what to do, and that type of thing. So there is a danger if you really aren't living in, if your feet aren't planted firmly on the ground in some cases. And when you get to that point, it's a concern. So the pseudoscience, the debunkers are really big on this. Pseudoscience is dangerous. In fact, one of Phil Klass's books, I think, was called "UFOs: A Dangerous Game," because overzealous belief in anything, not just UFOs and UAP, but a lot of different things, is not good for society. And you can talk about politics if you want, and how fervent people are about certain politicians versus other ones and political parties. There are some implications, and maybe the UAP are the canary in the coal mine that say, people are getting a little carried away about this, that, or the other thing. So let's tell people at least the UAP are actually stars, satellites, and maybe a few drones.
Let's one part of the preview we haven't gotten into is the survey that they held, asking Canadians some questions relevant to it. So do you know the background of this? Like, how many Canadians were questioned, where, who? I'm guessing for it to be like an effective survey, it must have just been kind of random people selected at random. Or do you know anything about it?
Well, I've always had issues about surveys.
Yeah.
And, polls have been questioned, especially recently with regard to politics. And it used to be like Gallup and Decima and Roper and a few others. They would, telephone surveys were the most common thing that could be done. I actually had led a Canada-wide survey about UFOs back a number of years ago, and I've written about it on one of my blogs and in my articles, where we surveyed people and it was, man on the street walking up to somebody, outside a supermarket and all that sort of stuff. And back then you could phone people with the white pages, not the yellow pages, but the white pages. Well, now you can't really do that anymore. The company that was enlisted by the Sky Canada project, they do it in a little different way. As I understand it, these survey and polling companies, they invite people to become part of a group pool. And then from time to time, they will, send a note, does anybody want to participate in this particular survey or that particular survey? The respondents will be part of this particular survey. And so a little over 1,000 people had been polled on this particular set of questions about UAP. And there's an interesting disclaimer right in the Sky Canada project section on the survey that says these results cannot be applied to consider the extended Canadian population. Mm-hmm. So if it says, 10% of the Canadian population thought this, well, not necessarily, but it shows that, of this particular group, mm-hmm. You can make these assumptions.
Yeah, and I'm looking at it now. It is 1,008 people completed the survey online. That took about 8 minutes to complete. And just as you say, before it gets into the results, it says, note that the results of such self-selected participant surveys cannot be described as statistically projectable to the entire Canadian population.
So self-selected surveys. So they were asked, would you want to participate in this? Sure.
Yeah. But regardless, the findings from this survey of 1,008 people are interesting. First one was, overall, how concerned, if at all, would you say you are with UAPs being observed over Canadian territory? Only 30% of the people who completed the survey cared about this or were concerned about this. I was surprised by that. I would think even if I gave this survey to my mom, she would think, oh, they're talking about spaceships above Canada. That's not real. But the question is, how concerned if they're observed above Canada? My mom would be like, whoa, if they were, 100%.
Right, but then look at the percentage of people who said that they were not concerned. Mm-hmm. And you see that the disparity is not that great between. I don't have it.
I have it in front of me. They have the choice of being when you were asked the question, how concerned, if at all, would you say you are with UAPs observed over Canadian territory? They could be very concerned, somewhat concerned, not very concerned, not at all concerned, and then there's the option for no response. 29% of the respondents were not at all concerned. 36% were not very concerned. And then there was the remaining 30% were split between very and somewhat concerned.
Right. Yeah. So, it's not as cut and dry. You can't say half of Canadians or whatever, but a good third of Canadians seem to be concerned about that. And that's a significant proportion, actually, when you think about it. Out of 40 million people, if a third are concerned that the UAP are in Canada, that's a lot of people.
How about this one? How strongly do you agree or disagree with the statement UFOs represent an issue for flight safety in Canada? 40% of the respondents said that UAPs did represent a flight safety issue. I don't know how you could say they don't. Like we've had examples of times in Canada over the last 5 or 10 years where anomalous objects interfered with planes. Like of course I'm thinking of the Toronto Island Airport situation, which was I think maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah. And that's significant. Even on that basis, 40 some percent think it's a concern. More people think it's a concern than not, because there's a proportion that didn't know anything and didn't comment. So, that alone suggests that if there's a flight safety or a safety issue, you have to study UAP.
Yeah, and just another very modern example of UAP representing an issue for flight safety. This is an American case, but of course with the wildfires that are happening in California right now, Canada sent several planes down that were specially equipped to scoop, they fly, they go down to the water, scoop up water, and then they dump it on the fires. And these planes, there's only a couple of them over there, but one of them was taken out of service during the height of the fires because it collided with something that they assumed was a civilian drone.
It's worse than that. They actually had to ground the entire fleet because they wanted to make sure that the danger was another one's going to fly and it won't bump into a drone as well.
Yeah. So when you're talking about UAP, you're also talking about drones that you don't realize are up there. Like drones they're becoming very common. They're getting bigger and more advanced, more, just more going on. So if you're flying an airplane, whether it's a commercial jet or just like a private little two-seater or something, you got to be concerned about that stuff.
Oh, yeah. And there's between 500,000, 600,000 registered drones in Canada. Who knows how many there really
Seriously, are. That's right. How about this one? How strongly do you agree or disagree with the statement, the nature of some UAPs has not been confirmed? So we're dipping our toes into the alien stuff right now. So over half, 55% of the respondents agreed that the nature of some UAPs has not been confirmed.
Yep.
Now I know you're one to you don't go too crazy down the alien train of thinking, but you can't say that the nature of all UAPs has been confirmed. Like, you'd have to be crazy to say, oh, we know what it all is.
No, I agree. We really don't know. And part of that is I don't think there's been enough investigation. But the fact is, there hasn't really been determined, and the public, this is from the public. The public thinks that they haven't been, and that shows that there should be more discussion and more information that is available to the public, so they better understand the problem.
I like this question. I'll ask you it before I give the the results of the 1,008 respondents. But Chris Rutkowski, how strongly do you agree or disagree with this statement? I believe there is false information about UAPs in social media.
Ding, 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 ding.
So they had 66% of the people agreed that there was false information about UAPs. Then there was another almost 20% that didn't agree or disagree. But I can say 100% yes, there is.
Yeah, 2/3 of the population thinks that there's false information about UAP. But at the same time, they think that UAP haven't been explained. Mm-hmm. So you don't have the right information, so how could you possibly explain them? Mm-hmm. It's these are all tied together.
Yeah, well, to play devil's advocate though, you could replace the word UAPs with anything, and I believe there is false information about blank on social media, and I'll agree. I'll be like, yes, put any word there and I'm in.
Yeah, about how much coffee you should have in a day or something.
Absolutely.
Like that. Yeah.
Let's see, here's a good one. The fifth question was, what do you think is behind or is the source of UAPs? So this one, 71% of the people said they didn't know. And I think that's interesting, because when we look at the earlier question, it's like, do you think it's all accounted for and we know what's going on? Most people, thought so, but 71% didn't know. 10%, aside from I don't know, the next most popular answer with 10% of people is it was aliens or extraterrestrial life. Does that surprise you?
No, it doesn't. I mean, that's still a going concern. I mean, the narrative about non-human intelligence and all that sort of stuff, it's all over media, and it's all over social media. So I think that's still it's, in fact, for me, it's interesting that it's so low. In fact, previous polls like Roper and Decima found that there, I think it was upwards of 30% of people polled thought that aliens were involved. So the fact that it's as low as 10 is actually a little encouraging.
Yeah, I'm just interested in seeing it broken down that way. Like, if you think of it this way, you get 10 people in a room. According to this survey, 7 of them are going to be like, I have no idea what's going on up there. There's going to be one fella in there who's like, it's UFOs. And then the next most common answers are foreign government and spies. Next would be natural phenomenon like weather or celestial objects. Next is drones, satellites, aircrafts, and weather balloons. And now we're getting into the very unpopular one. The 3% of the people said it was government. 3% said military. 1% said nothing. So I guess they're saying like there's nothing going on up there.
Well, but the 3% think that it's government or military. That's one of the strongest narratives in the United States. Is that a lot of them are, psyops. The New Jersey drones are supposed to be psyops and all this sort of stuff. So there's a lot more people who think that it's some sort of military operation than you would think, at least according to what we get the impression from the United States. But the poll in Canada, not so much.
Well, the follow-up question, or the next question after that, not a follow-up, just an entirely separate question, is how strongly do you agree or disagree with this statement? What they ask is, at present, there is no proof of the existence of extraterrestrial civilization. And the results, only half of the respondents agree that there is not proof of the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations. I was surprised they went there with this question.
I'm surprised they went there at all, because nothing in Mona Nemmer's discussion, she did allude to it, but the purpose of this was to find out what is being done about UAP in Canada, and they're doing it from a scientific perspective. And if you put a question in about extraterrestrials, that kind of says that's a possibility, and they haven't even got to that point yet to figure out, some of the possibilities. So that's sort of a lip service. And I suspect what happened is that some of the people who contributed, some of the experts, probably said, "Oh yeah, there definitely is proof that there's alien civilizations out there, and that UAP might represent them."
We want we want this question on our survey. You got to put it on, or you're silencing us.
Yeah. MUFON Canada, for example, was one of the organizations that contributed. So naturally, and a lot of people in MUFON believe that aliens are present, and the UAP are, a lot of them could be extraterrestrial. So that's probably where some of that came from.
Yeah, it's surprising to see it there. I'm going to skip down a little bit to another question that stood out to me, and I think this is relevant to what both of us do. Is, in general, how interested are you, if at all, in each of the following? Then they list some different topics, and one is news about UAP sightings in Canada. I think it was just about 60% of the people were interested in the topic, and coverage of UAPs on social media was a little over just about 40% of the people. So this just kind of tells me that, a lot of people are interested in reading these stories, be it in the news or going online and interacting with accounts and groups connected to this stuff. I was surprised by that because I see it as such a fringe topic.
Although, news, mainstream news, people are wanting to know more news, but at the same time, they want to see some information on social media, although the percentage is actually less than regular news. So they still want to hear from mainstream media about UAP.
I didn't like this question. They ask, and this is just maybe a sign of what's possibly to come, but we'll come back to this. But they ask, how likely would you be to use a mobile phone application to report information about or help identify UAPs? And just the reason I don't like it is, I'm picturing this dystopian world where the Canadian government just wants everybody to download some app and report the UFOs there. And I hate when there's an app for things. I don't want to download apps for anything, especially not for rewards at like a coffee shop or something. It's like, are you using our app? You go through McDonald's drive-thru, you're using the app. I'm like, of course not.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pushback about during COVID, for example, about having your vaccine record or something on your app, all that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of pushback about that.
Well, if done right, I could see an app being really, like, if it was done right, and I'm sure it wouldn't be, but I could see it being awesome. Imagine you have an app connected to the Canadian government where you see a map in Canada in real time. You're seeing the UFO reports appear, and you're able to, like, I don't know, click on it and see photos they took, or maybe cross-reference
and dash outside and see if you can see it yourself or something. And I think that's great, and that's part of what they're recommending. Okay. They would like to have eventually, pie in the sky. Have that type of thing working. It's brilliant, and it's say it's feasible. You can do it.
Oh yeah, because the data's there for the report. If the reports are getting submitted there, but the data in terms of things like you see a map of Canada, you see where the report is. You can then click a button to see an overlay of where the satellites would be visible, where airplanes are traveling, where the weather systems are. Like it could be very cool in real time if it was done right. But I think that for something like that to get funded, I think Canadians would need to make it very clear that they want this and value this, which leads to the next question. Over the course of your life, have you ever seen an object or a phenomenon in the sky that you could not identify? It was 27% of the people said yes, that they did see a UFO. And I don't think there's any surprise there.
It is surprising, actually.
Because it's low?
It's high.
Oh, high, okay.
Actually. Yeah, because all previous polls, and there, as I mentioned, Gallup and Roper and Decima and everybody, have done polls, and the poll that I commissioned and worked on was all consistent across the board from all of the polls, 10%.
Okay, this is 27.
Somewhere around 27. And that's very, very high. Now, again, that might be the selection from, if people in the group pool that this came from, they took the poll because they've seen a UFO or a UAP.
Would you like to submit or would you like to complete this survey related to UFOs above Canada? Like, I'm going to tell them what I saw in 1968.
It could be. I don't know the specifics. But the other thing is, if you burrow into the poll results a little more, it shows that of those people who have seen a UFO, 10% have seen it over the past year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very possible that when previous polls were done, asking people if they've seen UFOs or UAP, it was sort of a recent effect that, they thought, oh yeah, you know what? I just saw something last week. I'll say yes. But when you ask people in that section, some people have, burrowed down, over the last 20 years or something like that.
I think what you're getting at, if you said, yes, I saw one, there was a follow-up question of when was it? More than 43% of the people, or 43% of the people said it was over 10 years ago that I saw
10
this.
years ago.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so you could just say, oh, yeah, you know what? I did see something, but I can't really remember it, but I'm sure I saw something, in 2016 or something.
So they go deeper into it. So they're like, did you see one? 27% of the people said yes. The next question, if you did see one, is did you attempt to report your observation and to whom? So of the 27% of the people saw one, only 9% of that went on to try to report it. And almost half of them tried to report it to a non-governmental organization, which would be something like my website or MUFON or some unofficial like UFO-centric group. So
yeah, and that's actually perfectly in line with previous polls.
Yeah, I
previous
thought so.
Polls have asked that question. If you've seen something, have you reported it? And in general, it's been hovering around 10%. So we typically hear of 1 in every 100 UFO or UAP sightings. But this poll has it a little higher for people who've seen them. But the people who actually report it, that's consistently around 1 in 10. So that, again, that's, to see that there's some consistency supports previous studies.
Yeah, it's interesting. It goes on then, and now they're trying to kind of make a case, or not make a case, but just kind of drill down into what this should look like. They ask, like, if you saw something today, who would you report it to? 38% of the people didn't know. The most significant other answer, 28%, said police or law enforcement or military. And I think that's probably what I think most people would come up with. 70% said the media.
Yeah.
Call CBC and let them know what you saw out on the lake. See how far that gets you.
Yeah. Well, and there's a problem there. If most people say they would report them to the police, I've spoken with people in the police forces. There's no standardization of local police. I mean, Halifax police, I don't think, have any protocols in place for how to handle a UAP report. RCMP might, but even that is, that's changed over the years, and who knows exactly how they're doing it right now. But police in general, I don't think that they're prepared at all, so they wouldn't know what to do about investigating, and all that sort of stuff, a specific UAP report. So there's a problem there if people think they can report them to police, and yet the police themselves are really unprepared for it.
Yeah, and if you just look at the way they answer that question, if 38% didn't know what to do, 28% call the police, you then have such a significant number of people are just basically screaming into the abyss about what they saw.
Yeah,
it's not going to get
exactly.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Next question here was, do you think reports of UAP or UFO sightings are something that the Canadian government needs to do anything about? Half of the respondents said yes, with another 22% don't know. I think that's a vote for yes. Let's do what the Sky Canada project suggests.
Oh, absolutely. It's overwhelmingly in favor. In terms of the respondents. And, I think we hear that from people, the government should be doing something.
And I'll leave the survey questions with this last kind of bit is like anyone can find this online just by Googling Sky Canada Project. You can see the preview that I'm scrolling through, but the remaining questions, a lot of them deal with like how strongly would you support the government of Canada if they were doing this? Would you want transparency, and to which degree? And it seems like, transparency and support are not an issue. Like I think for the most part, Canadians are behind this, and that's why I want to ask you. Like, what do you think? What do you think is going to come of this, and what do you think is the future of UAP and UFO reporting in Canada?
Well, I am encouraged by this. I mean, again, it's dependent on how much, whether it's going to get funded, whether the recommendations are going to be taken to heart, whether the new government that we have after the next election is in support of it. Um, but I think the interest is there. I think a lot of the recommendations are going directly to scientists in this report. Canada's always been more interested in science rather than defense and military and that type of thing in terms of the UFO and UAP question. I think they're making an appeal to science to say take it seriously. And they're actually putting up a challenge to universities and colleges to talk about this more and to be more open about this. And if that really occurs, we could be looking at a new renaissance in trying to understand the UAP phenomenon. And it could be again that Canada will take the lead in this. As it has in so many ways above other countries in the world, including the United States, because we have a lot more documents that are available about things in the sky than the United States has about things that's been flying over its skies. So I think we're in a really good position, and with the support of the Minister of Science and the Prime Minister who are receiving this report, maybe something will be done, and there could be a lot of positive stuff coming out of this.
Whenever I have you on the show, I like to end with a listener contributed UFO encounter, and I have a good one for you here.
Okay.
Let's travel back to the 21st of November, 2024. It's a couple months back. We're gonna go to Cambridge, Ohio, and we're gonna go to Cambridge, Ontario. It's about 1:20 a.m. and a listener named Charles sees something in the sky, but he'll tell you about it. Here it comes.
Last night was the 21st of November 2024. I took out my dog for a walk at around 1:20 a.m. and we're located in Cambridge, Ontario. And anyway, as I was walking down the street, something caught my eye. Something brighter than usual caught my eye in the sky. And I looked up and saw a formation, a triangular formation of three white lights, completely silent, completely still. There was no movement at all. So I just basically stopped. My dog sat down and we just stared up at well, he didn't, but I did, stared up at this craft for about 2 minutes, and eventually it just disappeared. There was no movement. It didn't, zip away or fly away. It just was there, and all of a sudden it wasn't there. That was my experience. I'm very excited.
So he sees that. According to the survey results, he most likely doesn't know who to report it to. Next, he calls the police and they don't respond. So then he goes to CBC or the media and they don't respond. So he's left coming to the Nighttime podcast, and I will bring
and rightly so. People should be reporting them to you.
And we will take it seriously. What do you make of this sighting? Is it entirely unique the way he describes seeing a large object in the sky just disappear?
Well, and here's the thing: any three lights, in the sky is going to look like a triangle. He doesn't say explicitly that he saw an object. He saw these three lights in the sky in a triangular formation and assumed it was on a triangular craft. And we get that so many times. And your eyes can play tricks on you because they fill in the black part between all the lights to make you think that you're actually seeing something up there. And it may not be true. It may just simply be three lights, and the fact that it faded away could mean that the lights were there, and there are maybe stars or planets or something that appeared to be in the sky because they weren't moving. So what is hanging in the sky without moving for 2 minutes? Why would a ship, or how can a ship hover like that, and all that sort of stuff? It's hard to say. We'd need more information, Maybe by looking at a star atlas, we'd be able to say, oh yeah, those were these three lights. And if there was nothing in the sky, then I don't know what those things could be, whether they were flares or Chinese lanterns or whatever.
This could be a lot of explanations, but and another thing, the idea of like seeing something in the sky at night and then having it fade away. Could it be something as simple as like cloud coverage, like a cloud passing over whatever it is, satellites, stars, whatnot. But it's as Mona Niemer says in her introductory paragraph, from standing on the ground, it's very hard to tell the difference between a drone hovering a couple feet, 100 feet above you versus an aircraft, a couple thousand.
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't have the reference points and the, very honest mistakes. And I'll counter yours with a Transport Canada report that we just got in from November the 10th. The air crew of a Cargolux Airlines flight from Luxembourg to Atlanta reported a bright flash, possible flare, shooting star, explosion, or satellite, which was red and or yellow, and appeared to be coming down from above to below the nose of the aircraft. Joint Rescue Coordination Center of Halifax was notified because this took place about 400 kilometers south of Newfoundland, and they requested the crew call them once on the ground. The Joint Rescue Coordination Center was provided via the New York Oceanic Supervisor. So here's pilots of an international flight over Canada, or a region that's, not even over Canada, I guess it's over some oil rigs, and they see this light or flash, the fact that they used every term they could come up with without calling it a UAP, flash, flare, shooting star, explosion, satellite. And they didn't know what it was. And it went, below the nose of the plane. And, could that have been a fireball or a meteor? We don't know. But, it was reported, and the category of reporting was laser interference. Well, it wasn't a laser.
I just can only imagine, like a pilot, if you're however high in the sky, flying a plane full of people, and you see this bright, bizarre object just underneath your plane, like the amount of fear that you must have for that moment, and to not get an explanation when you get on the ground. Like, I saw something, like I could have crashed into that. And like, no, there's nothing up there.
Yeah. Poor Luxembourgians,
Yeah, but it's the reports are fascinating. The way the narrative surrounding this whole topic is changing, and it's something that, for as long as I've been into it, there's always been this conversation that eventually the government's going to show their cards and start taking this seriously. I don't know about showing their cards, if they even have cards, but it certainly seems like the tides are turning, and this topic is getting some serious attention by, the decision makers in our country, both in Canada, US, and in other countries around the world.
Yeah, although Canada's being a little more vocal. The United States is still playing its cards close to its chest, for sure. We really don't know what's going on within AARO. NASA says it's not really all that interested, but they're going to do something. Space Force in the United States is going to be classified. Who knows what's really going on in the United States Air Force, the United States Navy. But in Canada, we have hundreds and hundreds of documents about things that have been shot down over the Yukon, and the cases that are being reported to me and to others every day. So, I think the Sky Canada project is a really good step in laying the foundation of what might come forward.
I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Nighttime. If you want to read the actual Sky Canada project preview, I've linked to it in the episode's description. And with that said, I'm going to start wrapping up the episode, but before we part, let me end with some thanks. First, a big thanks to Chris for sharing another evening with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. A shout out to Monty Datta, who contributes the music to this episode, and Linz from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides the intro and outro voiceovers. But lastly, and most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. On the topic of support, I want to thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed, Colleen, Ella, and Christina. We appreciate you. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help us out here in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple bucks a month, and that money will fund the creation of new episodes, but it'll also give you those episodes 2 days early, give them to you ad-free, and give you access to a back catalog of episodes. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and telling all your like-minded friends why they should listen to Nighttime. If anyone out there has any story ideas, wants to give feedback on the show, or ask a question or comment to be aired and responded to in an upcoming episode, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com. I look forward to hearing from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.